Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel, where everything you're about to hear and see has been done in one take. I'm your host, the One Take Man. In my last video, link in the iCard above, assuming I didn't forget to link it up there, I've told you what I think would have improved Need for Speed Carbon. And this week's video, is the logical extension of that. I'll be discussing what I think would be the best possible sequel to Need for Speed Carbon. And by sequel, I don't necessarily mean that I want to extend the story of the game, or that I'm looking for ways to contrive for the player character to defeat the same boss characters again. Rather, I'm trying to look into the seeds that both Carbon and its predecessor, Most Wanted, have left behind, and look at what could grow from there. If it also happens that that some characters show up again only to get defeated again, well, you know, stuff happens. Without further ado, let's get into it. Starting with number one, the story. This will be kept fairly simple. It's gonna be short and sweet, and it's gonna be the story that worked for. It's going to be the story that worked for pretty much all of the games so far. Namely, the player character arrives in a new city and is looking to make a mark, leave a legacy in the street racing scene of this new city. The main question here would be motivation. What would motivate said character in order to really do that? There are three potential answers for that. The first one is the player was issued a challenge, or is answering an open challenge, which would be interesting, but I don't think it's necessarily compatible with the seeds that the other games have planted. Number two, the player character has been screwed over by another racer at some point in the past, and is now seeking revenge against this other racer, who has gained a position of prominence within the street racing scene of this new city, which is kind of a cliche at this point for when you're looking at both at Carbon, at Most Wanted, and even the Underground games. Or the third possibility, and the one I think would be the best. There has been a police crackdown on the street racing scene in Palmont. And so the player character had to run away and find a new home, a new city where they could establish themselves. Palmont is the game where the city where Need for Speed Carbon took place. So the street racing scene there has been cracked down, and the player is looking for a new home. I think that makes for the best story overall. Number two, setting. How do you make this setting distinctive? Most Wanted was distinctive by virtue of being the first Need for Speed game that had free roaming and took place during the day, which, you know, did actually attract some attention at the time. Whereas Carbon returned to nighttime racing, only had the city made up of various districts, each of which had their own distinctive visual flair. My idea for this new city and for this new game is that it would take place both during the day and during the night. I.e., it would have a day for night cycle. This will immediately make it more easily to remember and more visually distinctive. When it comes to the progression from day and night, though, I don't necessarily want it to be faux realistic, i.e. an IRL minute is an in-game hour or something like that. Rather, I want it to be dependent on the bosses you manage to overcome. So if you defeat a daytime boss, it's suddenly night, and if you defeat a nighttime boss, it's all of a sudden day. That could lead to the somewhat humorous happening of days and nights that happen towards the end of the game would be longer than those in the beginning, but you know what? I'm sticking with it. I also want to tweak the police system somewhat, because the police system for Most Wanted was good. I'll give it that, but it does require a little bit of innovation if it is to stand out in this new game. My idea is that instead of having the 6-tiered system that no, 6 tiers that Most Wanted tried to implement, those 6 tiers will instead be condensed into 3, which would overall be more aggressive than they have been in Most Wanted, with an additional 4th tier, where if your pursuit actually reaches that level, all other police cars step aside, and instead there is a special pursuit crew that takes over. This pursuit crew will be made up of former racers, who will also be driving cars that are faster and stronger, or tougher to destroy. And by tougher to destroy, I mean they cannot be destroyed and they cannot be outrun. The only way to escape the pursuit then is to either run and hide, or immobilize the pursuers somehow. If you don't, well then you get captured. And I also want to change some things about what happens when you get captured. So that if you get captured once, you have to pay your fines, but that's about it. If you get captured a second time, then you not only pay your fines, but also your car will get impounded. And if you get captured a third time, not only do the previous penalties stack up, but it's basically game over. Like, regardless of how many other cars you have, if you get caught a third time, you lose. Like, it's game over. You cannot do anything else. Because yeah, I really want to emphasize just how much of a threat the police actually is, or actually could be in games like this. 3. Enemies and bosses. I've already mentioned the police, so let's talk about the other racers you'll be facing. And let's start with a look at the boss characters. Most Wanted had 15, so that many times 3, which caused it to be a bit repetitive. And Carbon had 4. But aside from giving them distinct visual themes, the game didn't really know how to make them stand out, therefore leading that particular game to feel bloated. I think a happy medium could be reached with 7 boss characters. How exactly does the player go on to compete against them? Well, I want to take the hierarchy system that Most Wanted had, and make these and place these 7 bosses on a ranking, so to speak. So, and in order to be able to challenge for one boss, you have to overcome certain racing milestones. I win a set number of races. Maybe even manage some pursuit milestones along the way, because why not? You're not gonna be able to reckon what a threat of police is if you're not confronted by that threat. In another new facet, I want each of these bosses to also be backed by a crew, and therefore borrow some of the racing feel of Carbon. Crews will be made up of characters that the bosses will employ in order to ensure their dominance over these specific races that you, the player character, will have to overcome. Should you manage to overcome these racing milestones and the pursuit milestones, and be able to challenge the boss. The boss can still call up crews, or bosses could still call up crews in order to back them up in a series of races. The first race will be 3-on-3. The second race will be 2-on-2, and the third and final race will be a 1-on-1 between boss and player. Players will obviously be able to form their own crews as well. Crews who will back them up both during regular races and boss races, or who the player can dispatch in order to either conquer a particular race or defend a specific race, as in certain tracks, in order to make sure no one else is able to actually win it. Because yeah, I really do want to keep that mechanic from my new idea for Carbon as well. It might also be possible for the player to go down in the hierarchy should a strong up and comer or a boss character the player defeated be able to come back and stage their vengeance. Yeah, something to something to consider. And finally, number 4, recurring characters. They are not strictly necessary for this game, but they are necessary in order to in order to establish that that this is the culmination of a series. Who would come back? Well, the first names I have in mind would be Kenji, Angie, and Wolf, the Carbon Free. The first 3 bosses the player character overcomes in Need for Speed Carbon. And I want them to be the co-leaders of the first crew the player character will have to defeat. Because for some reason seeing those guys lose again is something I think would be funny. What would be less funny but still interesting is if the game revealed that Darius leads one of those special pursuit crews I've mentioned at the second point, and recruits the Carbon Free to be on his crew. Yeah, so that would immediately raise the stakes. And I think it would benefit the Carbon Free if they eventually turn on Darius. Who would precipitate such a turn? Nikki. Remember what I said at the beginning, that this game is only happening because Darius cracked down on the street racing scene in Palmont, or rather because there was a police crackdown in Palmont. Well, I want Darius to lead that crackdown, and the player character and Nikki would be among the only racers who managed to escape. Therefore, Darius coming after the player in this new city will be a continuation of their hostilities. Keep in mind, however, that Darius is a snake. He doesn't do things by half. He always tries to stack the deck in his favor, which means that he would not come to this new city unprepared. And keep in mind, at the beginning of the game, he would not know that the Carbon Free are in the city. So he has to have someone else with him in the beginning. Who could that be? I'm thinking of Razor, the final boss of Need for Speed Most Wanted, and a guy who also happens to be something of a snake, but he is more of a loose cannon, more willing to go on more extreme and dangerous pursuits in order to overcome the player. So having him dish out regular challenges that the player manages to avoid, but manages to overcome, but he himself still managing to avoid getting caught, is something that I think would be interesting and make for a more engaging experience. Mia could also show up in this new game, now that she, spoiler alert, is no longer an undercover cop. Alert off. she could show up in an advisory role, or maybe as a support role within your new crew. Various other racers from Need for Speed Most Wanted could also show up either as other bosses or as members of the crews of other bosses. Just a possibility, something to consider. And yeah, those are my suggestions for what I think would make for the best possible sequel to Need for Speed Carbon. I know it's a little bit too late to see an idea like this one implemented, but I hope you enjoy the prospect nevertheless. If you did, then please leave a like to this video, maybe even share it wherever you think other people will enjoy it as well. If you have anything you'd like to add to anything I've said, the comment section awaits your input. And if you want to see when my next video drops, then please subscribe. Ideally also ring the bell or do whatever else YouTube will ask of you in order to keep you notified. Until next time, I have been the One Take Man.